One shot. Let's go, let's go. You know that I won't lie like this. I don't wanna hide everything, like say that we're just friends, but no friends don't kiss. I feel my body giving in. You want my heart, baby, you say it don't faze me.
Hey folks, despite the fact that I used to call myself that Nikon guy, I've never been loyal to just one brand. It's kind of hard to commit, you know. I currently shoot with Nikon and Hasselblad, and I get to shoot with all kinds of different equipment. And the idea of a premium fixed lens, all-in-one kind of camera, no matter the brand, it really does appeal to me. Over the years, I've owned Olympus, Canon, Sony, Leica, Blackmagic, Fujifilm, and lots more that I'm probably forgetting right now. I guess you could say I've always been kind of polycamerous. As I prepared for this review and kind of put together my thoughts on the RX1R range of cameras, it struck me that these premium fixed lens cameras kind of have a quandary at their heart. They are, in essence, at least to some degree, a luxury product, but unlike cars or cameras or fashionable clothing, they don't have the same kind of brand added value as those categories, and I would argue even within the camera segment they don't carry across the same kind of brand loyalty that a normal camera would hold. Of course, if you are a Sony user or you just value what Sony represents, innovation, modernization, miniaturization, performance, then being a Sony will have some additional inherent value to it in the same way that the red dot does for Leica users. But because they're a fixed lens and a lot of the cameras in this segment have a built-in flash, there's very little in terms of things that you can carry across from the rest of your system. You're not going to be using your external flashes or your lenses. At most, it's going to be batteries and maybe the memory cards that you're using. So there's less an advantage to remain brand loyal to the other system that you happen to be shooting with. What I mean by that is I don't need to be a Sony shooter to go out and buy one of these, or a Fuji user to go and get an X100, or a dentist to buy a Q3. As a Nikon and Hasselblad shooter, they're all equally viable options really for me, because I don't need to think about what existing accessories and lenses I currently have. Hence the title, the polycamerous point and shoot. Now, if you're living the polycamerous lifestyle or you're interested in learning more about it, I'm actually going to make these shirts in a couple of different varieties, different fabrics, different colors available that you can purchase. I'll have details below in my link tree.
Sounds crazy, but maybe we could be a thing. I'll give it one shot, make it hot, show me what you bring. No, no, don't stop, talk a lot, tell me what you think. One shot to a lifetime.
Now, continuing on the poly theme of this video, this little camera has really divided the audience, and a lot of armchair critics have come out with scathing comments. I'm assuming having never used one. Surprisingly, Sony didn't really send these out for people to test out before launching it, which is very unlike Sony. Having said that, so I'm going to go through and look at each of these different aspects from 2 or 3 or 4 different points of view to give a more rounded approach. Now, first off, let's have a nice three-way conversation about the price. First up, facts. This is not an inexpensive camera. It's over $5,100 US before tax. Some people, myself included, have noted that that's getting up into kind of like a Q territory in pricing. Others have talked about the rate of inflation and the impact of the always varying US tariffs at the moment. But let's break it down because it's not as clear-cut as it may seem. Firstly, I was kind of wrong. This is not really at the same kind of price point as the Q3. There's still a big difference. If you're picking up the Sony Mark III with a thumbs up, with a lens hood, with an additional battery, trust me, you're going to want an additional battery, it comes in at about $5,669 US, or over $6,200 once you factor in the state sales tax. Whereas the Q3 with a hood and a thumbs up is still a good $1,300 more expensive than that. Now, you could take a holiday with that extra amount of money. $1,300 is not nothing. The Leica Q2 is still notably more expensive than this. And you'll note, if you're in the United States, that the sales tax is a big portion of both of those. On the Q3, for example, it's over $700. If you want to save the sales tax on your order, check out Payboo, the in-store payment card that instantly credits you back the amount of sales tax on your order. It's available exclusively at B&H Photo, sponsors of this video, and they also sent me out this guy and the Q3 to test out for you guys. Big thanks to them. Continuing the price conversation, is the price increase on this guy just due to inflation? To look at that, I first took a look at prices in Canada, so that eliminates the issue of the US tariffs. In 2015, the Mark II of this camera was 4,200 Canadian dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $5,427 in 2025, whereas this camera in Canada is actually $6,200. So the inflation doesn't explain all of it, in Canada at least. In USA, the Mark II when it came out was $3,300. Adjusted for 2025 inflation, that's $4,491. But then if you add in what currently I think is about a 15% tariff on goods coming from Japan, that gets us right in the ballpark of what this guy is actually selling for. However, even that isn't the full picture. Bringing in our third viewpoint to this poly conversation, we also need to look at how prices have adjusted in the overall Sony range. So back in 2015, the A7R Mark II was released, and that was $3,200, and the RX1R Mark II was out at the same time, and it was $3,300, so just $100 more expensive. 10 years later, we're now up to the A7R5, which came out at $3,900, but then was bumped up to $4,200 thanks to the tariffs. Whereas the RX1R is $5,100, so it's become $900 more expensive instead of $100 more expensive. So there's clearly an additional price premium that's been added to this range of cameras on top of what's going on with pricing and all of those different variables across the rest of the Sony range. And this really is an issue because clearly there's a bigger tech jump between the A7R 2 and 5 than there is between the Mark II and 3 of this camera. Also, the packaging of this camera is a little bit fancier than usual, and the eye-watering prices of the hood and the thumbs up suggest that this really is being positioned as a premium product by Sony. I'm going to come back to that point in a little bit. Next, let's talk about the specs. People love this lens. This is the 35mm f2 Zeiss lens. It's tried, tested, and beautiful. It's also over 10 years old, and it appears not to have changed at all, either optically or in terms of the autofocus motors that are being used on this guy. On one side, you could say that's great. People know and love this lens. They know the kind of images they're going to get out of it. So there's not going to be any surprises. It's not going to get clinically sharp or lose its character or anything like that. It should be the same, just with a more high-res sensor behind it. But on the other hand, given the premium pricing and given the 10 plus years interlude between the two, an update maybe would have been justified to at least make sure that it was able to handle the big jump in resolution over that time. Next up, let's talk about batteries, and I don't want to sound like a hater, but the Mark II of this camera had the most laughable battery life of any Sony camera I've ever tested, and that's really saying something because the early alphas did struggle in that regard. The previous version of this guy used this battery. This is the BJ1 battery, and it's from their action cameras. So on one hand, it's great that they've managed to squeeze the FW50 battery in. It's definitely an upgrade over the BJ1. But this is still a battery from 2009 that came out with cameras like the NEX3. It's 1020 milliamp hours compared to the 700 of the previous generation. That's definitely better, but it's certainly not current, and it's about half the capacity of the current FZ100 battery. So you're definitely going to want to have spares if you're going out for a full day of street shooting with this camera. I'm guessing the extra space that this much bigger battery required came from reallocating the space that the previous EVF had. It was an absolute engineering marvel. It would hide away when you're not using it, pop up and close again with one finger. It wasn't the best resolution or the sharpest, but it was incredibly well integrated. Well, now we have a fixed EVF and it's the same low res one from 10 years ago, but I'm guessing that's where the space for the battery has come from. The LCD thankfully has gotten an upgrade. It's now up from 1.23 million dots to 2.36 million dots, and it's now touch. So that's a win. But on the other hand, it's 2025, and of course it's going to have a touch screen. It's still, however, not their best LCD screen. It's kind of the bare minimum, and at this price point, is that enough? And the other thing, which is a real head scratcher for me, the Mark II had a tiltable screen. Now we have a fixed screen, so any high angle, low angle stuff, you just have to compose blind. I have to say, honestly, this is a big issue for me, and again, I'm not trying to hate on Sony. Sony are the kings of smart LCD design. Their different tilting, swiveling screens, the mechanics that go into them is unbelievable. Best on the market, but not on this guy. Considering even like the Leica Q3 added a tiltable screen, and at first people weren't sure because it did add 1 or 2 millimeters of size, but people really value it in shooting. This going back to being a fixed screen, I don't know how many people are going to prefer that option. The next ones, I'm not sure I can even put a poly spin to give different perspectives on it. This over $5,000 camera is not weather sealed, uses a single SD card, and it has no internal storage. They're all just not ideal. Also, forget about accessories. This guy comes with a lens strap, the eyepiece cover, and a lens cap. That's it. You want a lens hood? That'll be an extra $200. You want a thumbs up? That'll be an extra $300 plus tax. Those two items together actually cost more than the equivalent ones from Leica for their Q series of camera. It doesn't come with a battery charger. If you want that, it's an extra $75. The extra battery you'll need that came out in 2009, that's also another $75. So it's premium priced, but honestly, it doesn't come with many premium touches to justify that price, in my opinion. Which I have to say actually makes me reconsider, is this a premium luxury product? I actually think maybe it's just a niche product. To be continued. Next up, let's talk about image quality and overall performance. As you would expect, the image quality is great. It's got an incredible sensor, it's got a tried and trusted lens. Does the lens fully resolve the 60 plus megapixels of this camera? Honestly, I don't know. I don't do lab tests. The files look really nice, however. Head on over to my website. I'll give you some download files that you can see from my time shooting with Felicia. And I'm going to be taking this on some upcoming trips. So once I share some more comparison videos in future, I'll give you even more sample files that you can check out. In terms of responsiveness and the autofocus and the overall performance, yeah, it's leaps and bounds ahead of the previous generation. I would say it's the snappiest of any fixed lens camera from any manufacturer on the market. So big check mark. However, I would say if you're a Sony shooter, don't expect premium alpha level performance like a current 2025 alpha camera. It may share the high-end XR processor of some of those cameras, but the performance isn't that snappy, especially the AF. Whilst it's great and completely usable for what I imagine this is going to be used for, it's not at that absolute top tier level that we may be accustomed to with Sony. So don't think same processor means exactly the same performance. Next up, size, weight, and handling. And I think this is actually the fundamental metric that we need to be talking about for this camera. I think all of the frustrations that come with this camera, it's fixed screen, it's poor EVF, the old lens, the battery, the limited ports, and we could keep going on and on. I think all of these are trade-offs, at least in part, driven by Sony's desire or mandate to keep this as small as possible. I'll come back to size and weight. First, let's talk about handling. It is improved compared to the Mark II. There's no question about that. The shooting mode dial on the front has been removed, as well as, strangely, the orange ring that I think people quite loved on this. It kind of was a carryover to the A series lenses. The button placement now is more in line with the current range of alpha cameras. So if you aren't POLYCAMERAUS and you're keeping it all within the Sony family, you won't at least get lost between this and your other bodies. I would say the buttons are also less fiddly to control than the previous generation, which I did find quite annoying. But having said that, it's still a lot of small buttons in a limited amount of space. So I guess it depends on what you're going to be using it with. I definitely wouldn't want to be using this wearing gloves, for example. Now, comparing the Mark II to this, the Mark III, the weight has actually come down by about 10 grams, which is kind of incredible. When you think about svelte products, they do just get fatter. Like the first Toyota RAV4 was this tiny little thing, and now it's the size of what a Prado used to be. The original Minis now look like they're wearing a sumo fat suit. They're unrecognizable from what they were. So losing weight is actually pretty fantastic. And whilst you would hardly notice it, it has grown a little bit taller. You can kind of get a sense of it when you compare it, the pictures of it, to the previous one. The top dials and the shutter release and even the hot shoe mount are all now flush with the top of the camera, whereas they were raised up above it. And I think that's because basically the waterline of the top of the camera has come up to level all of that out, to just give it a few extra millimeters of space to cram all of that circuitry into this tiny, tiny body. So back to the issue of the size. Adding weather sealing probably would have added size or weight. So would a tilting screen. So would the bigger battery or internal storage, or potentially stronger autofocus motors, or a new lens design altogether, or a better EVF, although I don't know that that would add much size or weight. And you could certainly argue, and a lot of people are, that a lot of those things should have been updated given the time that's passed and given the huge price of this camera. But I really think that Sony's self-imposed size and weight limitations on this camera, at least in part, explain most of the compromises of this camera. So the $64,000 question then is, do people really care about it being this size? Leica, for all of their arguable faults, do a lot of things right. Their EVFs and screens are always cutting edge. I mean, like really at the front of the market. They know that you're going to have your eye up there a lot of the time, and having a great quality EVF makes a big difference. This one is simply poor. It was okay 10 years ago. It's now not really okay. Leica also do interface and battery life really well, and it kind of shows because the Q3, despite being a little older now, is still regularly backordered at camera stores. So in my next video, I'm not going to compare this to an A7CR with the 35mm prime lens. Whilst you could then get the same specification for less money, I think that comparison really misses the point of who this camera is actually for. I mean, who in their right mind would pay this price for this camera in this highly competitive market? I think the answer is someone who may or may not be POLYCAMERAUS, but they want a full frame, quality, fixed lens camera that's as small as possible. If not, they would go for something that's a bit bigger but a lot cheaper, or something that's a bit bigger but a lot more refined with less compromises. They're going for this because it is tiny, and their imperative to have it as small and light as possible makes all of those compromises worthwhile. So in my next video, I'm going to be comparing this to other POLYCAMERAUS fixed lens premium compact cameras like the Q3. So let me know what you'd like to see tested and compared in that video. I'm going to be doing some significant and extended hands-on testing with those and sharing you lots of files, so make sure you're following over at Instagram. Please do check out Paybu, link below. You can download the sample files. All of that will be in my link tree, as well as details about the new POLYCAMERAUS range of merch. Let me know any questions you have, and I'll see you soon.